I used to believe that silence could heal anything. When Lucas stopped calling, I told myself he just needed space. When birthdays passed without a word, I said he must be busy. But when he told me, voice sharp and cold through the phone, "You'll never see Jamie again, Mother," that was when silence became unbearable. My name is Grace Ellington, and I hadn't seen my grandson for almost 2 years. The walls of this old house, once alive with laughter and the smell of Sunday dinners, now echoed only with the tick of the kitchen clock and the wind tapping gently against the windows. Sometimes, I'd stand by the living room window, clutching the small blue sweater Jamie had left behind. It still smelled faintly of his shampoo, something like apples and sunlight. He was only 6 when I last held him. He'd wrapped his arms around my neck and whispered, "I'll see you soon, Grandma." I didn't know then that soon would stretch into years. Lucas had always been my pride. After his father died when he was just 16, I did everything I could to give him a better life. 2 jobs, sleepless nights, endless prayers. I thought my love would be enough. But when he met Tara, everything changed. Tara was beautiful, flawlessly so. She had the kind of confidence that filled a room and the kind of smile that hid sharp edges. She worked in real estate, spoke like every word was a promise, and somehow convinced my son that family was an obligation, not a blessing. At first, I tried to welcome her. I bought her flowers, cooked her favorite meals, even let her redecorate my kitchen when she called it too old-fashioned. But every gesture was met with polite distance, every attempt to connect subtly dismissed. And soon, even Lucas began to look at me the way she did, like I was from another world. The last time I saw Jamie was the day before Christmas, 2 years ago. I'd brought over his presents a box of Lego sets and a hand-knitted sweater I'd made while watching old movies. Tara met me at the door, her lips painted in a perfect shade of coral, her tones syrupy sweet. "Lucas isn't home, Grace, and Jamie's napping. Maybe next time." I remember standing there, the cold seeping into my hands as I clutched the wrapped gifts. "Could you just tell him Grandma loves him?" I asked. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course." When I turned to leave, I saw the curtain move upstairs. A small hand pressed against the glass. Jamie, watching me go, that was the last time. After that, Lucas stopped answering calls. Letters came back unopened. And then one day the message arrived short, merciless, final. "Please stop contacting us. It's best for everyone." I never argued. Pride, maybe. Or heartbreak. But I stopped reaching out. Months passed. Seasons turned. I found small routines to fill the emptiness: gardening, baking bread, volunteering at the local library. My neighbor, Ruth Carter, became my closest friend. She had a laugh that could chase away even the darkest thoughts. "Grace," she'd often say, "you raised a good man. Sometimes good men just lose their way. Don't close your heart before he finds his way back." I'd smile politely, though deep down, I didn't believe he ever would. Then, one afternoon, something changed. I was sitting on the porch, mending a tear in my old cardigan, when a sleek black car pulled into my driveway. It wasn't the kind of car you saw in our quiet neighborhood. My heart thudded once, hard. And when the door opened, I saw him, Lucas, looking older. Tired, his tie loosened, his eyes clouded with something that wasn't quite pride anymore. "Mom," he said softly. For a second, I couldn't move. His voice, after all those years, made the world tilt just a little. I set the cardigan aside and stood clutching the railing. "Lucas," I breathed, unsure if I should smile or cry. He glanced toward the house, then back at me. "Can we talk?" Inside, the air felt thick with all the words we'd never said. He sat at the kitchen table, the same one where he'd done homework as a boy. I made tea, my hands trembling slightly as I poured. He cleared his throat. "I heard you sold the house." There it was. "No, how have you been?" "You know I missed you, just straight to the point." "Yes," I said quietly. "The papers went through last week." He looked stunned. "Why would you do that?" I smiled faintly. "Because I needed to move on, Lucas. This house is full of memories I can't live in anymore." His jaw tightened. "You didn't tell me." I met his eyes. "You didn't give me the chance." For a moment, silence filled the room. He looked down at his untouched tea, then sighed heavily. "Mom, I need your help." There it was, the unspoken truth behind his visit. My heart sank, but I didn't interrupt. He continued, his tone low, almost ashamed. "The place we're renting is being sold. We don't have anywhere else to go. I thought maybe you'd let us stay here for a while. I stared at him. The same son who'd told me I'd never see my grandson again now sat in my kitchen, asking for the home I'd just sold. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. For the first time in years, I didn't rush to fill the silence. Finally, I said, "I'm sorry, Lucas. It's no longer mine to give." He looked up sharply, confusion flickering into disbelief. "You sold it already?" "Yes," I said softly, "to a family that needed it more than I did." He exhaled, frustration slipping into his tone. "Mom, this isn't fair." "No," I interrupted gently. "It's not. But neither was what you did to me." For a long moment, he just stared at me, caught between pride and regret. Then he looked away, jaw clenched, and whispered, "I didn't know it would come to this." I folded my hands, the ache in my chest both sharp and strangely freeing. None of us ever do, and for the first time since he'd walked out of my life, I felt something shift, not forgiveness, not yet, but the faintest beginning of peace. Lucas didn't say much after that. He just sat there, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of every bad decision he'd made had finally caught up with him. I watched him trace the rim of his teacup with one finger, an old habit from when he was a boy and didn't know how to apologize. "I didn't mean for things to get this bad," he finally murmured. "You know how Tara can be. She just thought—" His voice faded, swallowed by the stillness of the kitchen. "I know," I said quietly. "She thought I was in the way." He winced, like the truth had burned. "It wasn't like that." I tilted my head slightly. "Then what was it like, Lucas? Because from where I stood, it looked a lot like you chose her comfort over your mother." His lips parted, but no words came. For a moment, he was 16 again, standing in the hallway after an argument, angry but lost, desperate but proud. I poured another cup of tea and slid it toward him. "You should eat something." He nodded, though his appetite had clearly fled. We sat in silence, the only sound the faint ticking of the old wall clock. Finally, I asked the question that had been sitting heavy on my heart for years. "How is Jamie?" That seemed to break him. His expression softened, and for the first time since he'd arrived, he smiled a tired, sad smile. "He's getting so big. Loves reading now. His teacher says he's ahead for his age." "Reading?" I whispered, warmth blooming in my chest. "You remember how he used to sit on my lap and demand stories about the moon?" Lucas chuckled faintly. "He still loves that one." My throat tightened. The ache of missing Jamie had been a dull wound for so long that hearing even a sliver of his world brought tears to my eyes. "He misses you, Mom," Lucas added softly. I blinked. "Does he?" He nodded, eyes downcast. "He asks about you sometimes. Tara doesn't like it, but I think he remembers how much you loved him." For a moment, the air felt lighter. I could almost hear Jamie's laughter echoing through the house, his small feet running across the old wooden floors, but the moment passed as quickly as it came. "So," I said carefully, "where will you stay now?" Lucas hesitated. "That's the thing. The new place we were looking at fell through. I thought maybe—" He trailed off, as if afraid of finishing the sentence. "You thought maybe I still had the house," I said for him. His silence was confirmation enough. "I'm sorry, Lucas," I said gently. "If you'd come a few months earlier, maybe I could have helped. But now it's gone," he rubbed his temples. "What about your new place? You must be moving somewhere." "I am," I said. "A small cottage near the lake. It's quiet, simple. Just enough for me." He looked almost incredulous. "You're moving alone? Out there?" I smiled faintly. "I've been alone for a long time, Lucas. The only difference now is that I've stopped waiting for someone to come back." That stung him. I could see it. His shoulders tensed, his jaw tightened. For years I'd bitten back words like those, but this time I didn't soften them. "Mom," he said finally, "I know I've made mistakes, but you have to understand Tara wanted a clean break. She thought your influence was confusing for Jamie." I let out a quiet laugh. "Confusing? You mean love and stability?" He didn't reply. The silence that followed wasn't angry, it was exhausted. The kind of silence that comes when all the pretending finally runs out. After a long while, he said, "Maybe I could talk to the buyers. If you told them who I am, maybe they'd rent it to us just for a while." I shook my head slowly. They've already moved in. A young couple with twins. I gave them my full blessing to make this place their home. He sighed, slumping back in his chair. I can't believe this. I studied him, the fine lines around his eyes, the worry etched deep into his expression. He looked like a man who'd been running from his own choices for too long. Lucas, I said softly, sometimes we have to lose what we take for granted before we learn how to value it. He looked up at me, eyes glistening faintly. Are you saying you won't help us? I'm saying I already did, I replied. For years. You just didn't see it. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. There were no words left that could bridge the distance between us in that moment. The sound of the clock ticked on, steady and unrelenting. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the old oak tree in the yard, the one Lucas had climbed as a boy, and later helped Jamie swing from. The swing still hung there, frayed rope swaying in the afternoon breeze. I felt him stand behind me. You really love this house, he said quietly. I did, I whispered. But love doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means letting go so someone else can build new memories where ours ended. He was quiet for a while. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. Tara's going to be furious when she finds out I came here. I turned to him. Then maybe she should ask herself why it had to come to this. He gave a small, humorless laugh. You always did have a way of saying things that make me think. I smiled. That's what mothers are for. He looked at me for a long time, something unspoken passing between us, regret, perhaps, or recognition. And then quietly he said, Would it be okay if Jamie called you? Just once? The question hit me like sunlight after a long winter. I tried to answer, but emotion choked my voice. Finally, I managed, I'd like that very much. When he left, the silence returned, but it wasn't as heavy anymore. As his car disappeared down the street, I sat back down at the kitchen table, staring at the empty teacup where his hand had rested. For the first time in years, I felt something stir deep inside Hope, fragile but real. Outside, the swing creaked softly in the wind. I whispered to no one in particular, Maybe soon, Jamie, maybe soon. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the faint glow of the streetlight spilling through the curtains. My mind replayed every word, every flicker of expression on Lucas's face. The tremor in his voice, the way he'd looked when he mentioned Jamie. Part of me wanted to call him back, to say he could stay for a while, that maybe we could rebuild what had been broken. But another part, the quieter, wiser part, knew it wasn't time yet. Some wounds need to breathe before they can heal. Around midnight, I got up and made myself some chamomile tea. As the kettle whistled, the phone rang. My heart jumped. It was too late for anyone to be calling. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello? A small, trembling voice replied, Grandma? For a heartbeat, I forgot how to breathe. That voice, I'd know it anywhere. Jamie? I whispered. Daddy said I could call, he said, excitement bubbling in his tone. He's in the living room, but Mommy doesn't know. I just wanted to say hi. Tears filled my eyes so fast I had to sit down. Oh, sweetheart, hi. I've missed you so much. I missed you too, he said softly. I still have the sweater you made me. Mommy said it doesn't fit anymore, but I keep it in my drawer. I laughed through the tears, pressing the phone to my heart. You always liked that one, didn't you? The blue one with the stars? Yeah, he giggled. It makes me feel like you're hugging me. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my voice. Oh, Jamie. I wish I could hug you for real. He was quiet for a moment, then whispered, Maybe you can. Daddy said we might come see you. Is that true? My throat tightened. Maybe, I said gently. I hope so, sweetheart. Can I tell you something? He asked, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Of course. I don't like when Mommy says mean things about you, he confessed. She says you made Daddy sad, but I don't believe her. I think Daddy's just tired. He works all the time. I bit my lip, struggling to hold back tears. You're a very smart boy, Jamie, and you have a kind heart. Never lose that, he giggled again, the sound light and pure. Okay, Grandma. I have to go now. Daddy's coming back. I love you. I love you too, I whispered, my voice barely holding together. So much. The line went dead. And I sat there for a long time, phone still pressed to my ear, heart trembling with a kind of joy I hadn't felt in years. Ruth came by the next morning, as she always did, carrying a basket of muffins and gossip. The second she saw my face, she froze. "Grace Ellington, you look like you've seen a ghost. Or maybe an angel," I laughed softly, wiping at my eyes. "Maybe both." "Jamie called me last night." Her hand flew to her mouth. "No, yes," I said, my voice breaking. "Lucas let him. Just for a few minutes, but it was enough." Ruth set the basket down and pulled me into a hug. "Oh, Grace, that's wonderful. Maybe this is it. Maybe things are finally turning around." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But deep down, something told me it wasn't going to be that easy. And I was right. 3 days later, the storm hit, not a real one, but the kind that shatters what little piece you've managed to rebuild. I was in the garden when I heard the knock. It wasn't polite or hesitant, it was sharp, deliberate. When I opened the door, there she was, Tara. Even after all this time, she hadn't changed much. Still perfectly put together cream blouse, pearl earrings, hair swept up in a sleek knot. Her smile, however, was brittle. "Grace," she said coolly. "May I come in?" I stepped aside, though my heart sank. Of course. She walked in like she owned the place, her heels clicking against the wood floors. Her eyes flicked around, scanning every corner as if searching for something to criticize. "I heard you sold the house," she began. "Quite a surprise." "Yes," I said simply. "To strangers?" she asked, feigning curiosity but dripping with judgment. "To a young couple who'll love it," I replied. She gave a short, mirthless laugh. "You really have a flair for the dramatic, don't you?" I folded my hands calmly. "I call it moving on." Her smile vanished. "You know, Lucas didn't tell me he was coming here. I had to find out from Jamie. Imagine my shock when I learned he'd gone begging to his mother." "Begging?" I repeated softly. "That's not how I saw it. I saw a son trying to make peace," she scoffed. "Peace? Don't pretend you're innocent in all this, Grace. You've always made him feel guilty, always made him choose." I felt the old ache stir again, but kept my tone gentle. "I never asked him to choose, Tara. He just forgot how to stand in the middle without pushing someone down." Her eyes flashed. "You're unbelievable." I met her gaze steadily. "And you're scared. Because for the first time, he came here on his own." For a moment, something flickered across her face, anger, then fear. "Stay out of our lives, Grace. You had your chance and you ruined it. Don't confuse my son any more than you already have." "Your son?" I said, unable to stop the bitterness that crept into my voice. "You mean my grandson?" She turned sharply toward the door. "Goodbye, Grace." As she left, I noticed her hands trembling slightly. I waited until the sound of her car faded, before sitting down at the kitchen table, trying to steady my breathing. Ruth arrived an hour later, and one look at me told her everything. "What happened?" "She came," I said quietly. "Tara," Ruth's eyes widened. "What did she want?" "To make sure I know my place," Ruth frowned. "And what did you tell her?" I smiled faintly. "That I stopped asking for one." We sat there in silence, the air heavy with unspoken thoughts. Then Ruth reached over and squeezed my hand. "She can't erase love, Grace, not the kind that runs through blood." I nodded, but the weight of Tara's words lingered long after she'd gone. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the oak tree, I walked out to the swing and sat down. The rope creaked softly beneath me. I watched the horizon turn gold and whispered, "Hold on. Jamie, Grandma's not done fighting yet." The letter came 3 days later. It was tucked neatly into my mailbox, sealed in a plain white envelope with no return address. For a moment, I thought it might be another charity flyer, or one of those retirement home pamphlets that always seemed to find their way to my door. But when I turned it over, I saw my name written in careful, familiar handwriting. Lucas. My heart skipped. I carried it inside with trembling hands, setting it on the kitchen table where the morning sunlight poured through the window. For a long moment, I just stared at it. My mind swirled with possibilities: an apology, a warning, or perhaps something else entirely. Finally, I slid my finger under the seal and unfolded the paper. The first line stopped me cold. "Mom, I don't know how else to say this, but I think I've made a mess of everything." I sank into the chair as my eyes traced his words, each sentence heavier than the last. "After I left your house, Tara and I had a fight. She found out I brought Jamie to call you, and she's furious. She says I've betrayed her trust and that I've let you manipulate me again. I don't even know what that means anymore. She took Jamie to her mother's for a few days. I haven't seen him since. I think she's trying to make me choose again. But this time I don't think I can. I need to figure out what kind of father I want to be and what kind of son. I'm sorry for everything. For the years I wasted, the words I never said. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope you'll keep a place for me in your heart. Love, Lucas. By the time I finished reading, the words blurred through my tears. The letter shook in my hands. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was the first real bridge he'd built in years. I pressed the paper to my chest, whispering a quiet prayer of gratitude. Then I folded it carefully and slipped it into the top drawer of my desk, right beside an old photograph of him as a boy, gap-toothed, grinning, holding up a fishing line with a fish barely bigger than his hand. That evening, Ruth stopped by again. I told her about the letter, and she listened quietly, her eyes soft. "Oh, Grace," she said finally, "that's the first honest thing he's said in years." I nodded. "It feels different this time." Ruth leaned back in her chair. "Maybe it's time you tell him how you really felt all those years." Not out of anger, but truth. He can't fix what he doesn't understand. Her words lingered with me through the night. The next morning, I sat at that same kitchen table, pen in hand, and began to write. The words came slowly at first, then faster, like a dam had broken inside me. "Dear Lucas, you say you've made a mess of everything, but messes can be cleaned. What matters is that you've finally stopped pretending there isn't one. When you walked away, I told myself I'd failed you. I thought maybe I'd loved too much, held too tight. But I've learned that love doesn't always look the same to everyone. Some people see it as comfort. Others see it as control. Maybe we both made mistakes in how we gave and received it. I never wanted to stand between you and Tara. I just wanted a place at your table, a corner in your life. I wanted Jamie to know that love doesn't vanish when people disagree. It only fades when it's starved of truth. You don't have to choose between us anymore. You only have to choose to be the kind of man you'll be proud of when Jamie looks at you one day and asks, 'What did you do when things got hard?' I'll be waiting always, but I won't beg anymore. I've done enough waiting to last a lifetime. With love, Mom." When I sealed the envelope, I felt something inside me loosen a quiet release. The kind that comes after years of carrying what you can't name. I mailed the letter that afternoon. The world looked softer somehow. The air carried the faint scent of lilacs, and the sunlight shimmered through the oak leaves like blessings I hadn't earned but still received. But peace is a fragile thing. It never stays long before life tests it again. 2 weeks passed. No reply, no call. Not even a text. I tried to stay patient. I told myself he needed time to think. But one morning, while I was trimming roses in the garden, Ruth came running down the street, her face pale and breathless. "Grace," she shouted, clutching a folded newspaper. "You need to see this, my stomach sank." "What is it?" She handed me the paper, her hands shaking. "The headline," she whispered. I looked down. The words printed in bold froze me in place. "Local real estate agent under investigation for fraudulent property sales, Lucas Ellington, named among associates." The article blurred as I read. My fingers tightened around the edges of the page. Lucas, fraud, investigation. Words that didn't belong together, not in any world I knew. "Ruth," I breathed. "This can't be right." She put a trembling hand on my shoulder. "I don't know, Grace, but it says he's been called in for questioning. Something about illegal contracts, fake listings, money moved around under Tara's name." I felt dizzy. "Under Tara's name?" Ruth nodded grimly. "She worked in his office, didn't she?" "Yes," I whispered. She was the one who pushed him into real estate in the first place. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The newspaper fluttered in the wind, pages trembling like my heart. After Ruth left, I sat on the porch alone, staring at the fading ink on the headline. My son, my Lucas, was caught in something dark. Something I didn't understand, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't sure if the truth would bring us together. Or tear us apart forever. That night, as I locked the door, the phone rang again. My hand trembled as I lifted the receiver. "Mom?" It was Lucas, his voice hoarse, cracked, exhausted. "Lucas," I whispered. "What's happening?" He exhaled shakily. "I didn't do it, Mom. I swear I didn't, but I think Tara did. The silence after his words felt like a weight pressing on my chest. I gripped the phone tighter, afraid that if I blinked, the connection in him would vanish. Lucas, I said quietly, trying to steady my voice. Slow down. Tell me what's going on. There was a pause, then a shaky breath. They came to my office this morning, police, investigators. They had warrants, files, everything. They said several property deals under our agency's name were fake houses that never existed, clients who never got refunds. The money went through our joint business account. My name's all over it, but Mom, it wasn't me. I swallowed hard. You're saying Tara, she set it up, he interrupted. Or at least she knew. I started noticing things months ago, transactions that didn't make sense, missing documents. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off, said it was just business adjustments. His voice cracked. But now it's all coming down and she's gone. Took Jamie, left the house, won't answer my calls. Oh, Lucas, I breathed. I pressed a trembling hand against my chest. Where are you now? I'm at a motel near the highway. They took my phone and computer, but I managed to get this old phone from a friend. I don't have much time, Mom. I need your help. The words struck a familiar chord. How many times had I heard them before when he was a child? Scraped knee, broken toy, bad grade. But this time it wasn't something I could fix with a bandage and a kind word. What do you need? I asked softly. I need somewhere to stay, just for a few days. Somewhere no one will think to look. I hesitated. I just sold the house, and the cottage I was moving into wasn't ready yet. Still, the thought of him alone, scared, hunted, it tore at me. There's the old guest house behind Ruth's property, I said after a moment. No one's used it in years. I can talk to her. She'll understand, he exhaled, relief flooding through his voice. Thank you, Mom. I didn't know who else to call. That sentence, I didn't know who else to call, lodged itself deep in my heart. It was both an apology and a plea. Be careful, Lucas, I whispered. Don't trust anyone until we figure this out. Not even Tara's friends. I won't, he said quietly. And Mom, tell Jamie I love him if she lets you see him. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I sat there for a long time, the receiver still in my hand, listening to the faint hum of the disconnected tone. Then slowly, I set it down and reached for my coat. Ruth didn't hesitate when I told her. Of course he can use it, she said firmly. Lord knows that old place could use some life. I'll get the spare key. She handed it to me, eyes full of concern. Grace, are you sure you're ready for this? He's in trouble and it could get messy. This isn't just family drama anymore. I know, I said quietly. But he's my son, and I won't lose him again, not like this. That night, I drove out to the guest house. It sat behind Ruth's sprawling garden, small and a little run down, but private. I left the key under the doormat with a note. Lucas, you're safe here. Don't draw attention. I'll bring food in the morning. Love, Mom. Then I returned home and sat by the window, staring out into the quiet darkness. Every sound made me flinch, the wind through the trees, the creak of the gate. I hadn't felt fear like this in years. The next morning I found him there. He looked exhausted, hollow-eyed, his shirt wrinkled, stubble shadowing his jaw. When he saw me, he didn't speak right away, he just stepped forward and hugged me. It was the first time in nearly a decade my son had held me. I didn't cry then. I just closed my eyes and whispered, You're safe now. He pulled back, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who used to bring me dandelions and call them flowers. I can't stay long, he said. They'll trace everything eventually. We'll figure it out, I said. But first you need rest. He nodded, too tired to argue. I left him with some food and clean clothes, promising to come back later. When I returned home, there was a car parked out front, sleek, black, familiar, Tara. She stood at my gate, arms crossed, wearing dark sunglasses and an expression that could slice glass. Well, she said, voice dripping with mock politeness. Isn't this convenient? He's back, isn't he? I didn't flinch. What are you talking about? She smirked. Oh, please. Don't play innocent, Grace. I know him too well. When things fall apart, he runs to you. He always has. I met her gaze squarely. And whose fault is that? She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You think you're helping him, but you're not. He's in over his head. You have no idea what's coming. I held my ground. Then tell me. What did you do, Tara? She smiled coldly. Me? Nothing. I just made sure I wasn't the one holding the bag when everything fell apart. Her words hit me like a slap. You framed him, I said slowly. She tilted her head, feigning innocence. Framed? Such an ugly word. Let's just say Lucas was careless. I simply redirected the consequences. I stared at her, heart pounding. You're talking about his life about your son's father, she shrugged. I'm talking about survival. And with that, she turned, walked to her car, and drove away, leaving the smell of expensive perfume and poison in her wake. I stood there on the porch long after she was gone, the weight of her words pressing down on me. Inside, the phone rang again once, twice, then stopped. When I checked the caller ID, it was an unknown number. A message followed moments later. If you're hiding him, Grace, you're making a mistake. The police will come for both of you. No name. No signature, but somehow I knew it was her. That night, as the wind howled outside and the house creaked with the weight of secrets, I made a choice I never thought I'd have to make again. If protecting my son meant standing against the storm, then so be it. I picked up my phone, dialed Ruth, and said in a voice that no longer trembled, I need your help. We're not running anymore. Ruth didn't hesitate. She never did. Within 20 minutes, she was at my front door, still in her nightgown, hair tucked messily under a scarf, flashlight in hand. When you said, we're not running anymore, she said breathlessly, I figured that meant trouble. And Lord help me, Grace, I do love trouble when it's for the right reason. Despite the fear churning inside me, I couldn't help but laugh softly. Thank you, Ruth. She closed the door behind her and locked it. So, where's Lucas? At the guest house, I said quietly. He's safe. For now. She nodded, then sat down at the kitchen table, the same place where so much of my life had unfolded in quiet heartbreak and quiet courage. All right, let's think this through, she said. Tara's clearly behind something, but the police will have proof pointing to Lucas. We need something that says otherwise. I sighed. I wouldn't even know where to begin. Ruth leaned back, crossing her arms. You said Tara handled the paperwork, right? If she's guilty, she's not going to leave her fingerprints all over it. But if she used Lucas's name to authorize transfers or falsify contracts, that means she forged something. People like her always get sloppy somewhere. I stared at her, realization dawning. The house, I whispered. Ruth blinked. The one you sold? Yes. When I finalized the sale, Tara insisted on handling some of the legal paperwork on Lucas's behalf years ago, back when he first joined her firm. There were inconsistencies, but I didn't think much of it at the time. If I can find those old records, then maybe, Ruth finished for me, you can prove she's been using his name for fraud for longer than anyone thought. It was a thin thread of hope, but it was all we had. We drove to my storage unit the next morning, the place where I kept old boxes, photographs, tax forms, and the leftover clutter of a life half lived in waiting. Dust hung in the air like fog as I unlocked the door. Lord have mercy, Ruth muttered. It's like the Smithsonian in here. I smiled faintly and pulled open the first box labeled Documents Lucas and Tara, 2014-2020. Inside were neatly bound folders, labeled in Tara's precise handwriting. For years, I'd thought it was a kindness her way of keeping us organized. Now I realized it had been control disguised as efficiency. Ruth pulled out a stack of envelopes and whistled softly. She really loved her paperwork, didn't she? I flipped through the pages until one stopped me cold. A property sale from 2018. The signature line bore Lucas's name, but I recognized instantly that it wasn't his handwriting. It was too neat. Too deliberate, Ruth, I whispered. Look at this, she squinted. That's not his signature. No, I said. But it's on dozens of these forms. She's been doing this for years, using his name for deals he never signed. Ruth grinned grimly. Well, we've got her. Not yet, I thought. But maybe soon. We packed up the documents, every page feeling heavier than the last, and drove back to my house. Lucas was waiting at the guest house when I arrived. His eyes were sunken, his shoulders tense. When he saw the box in my arms, he frowned. What's all that? Proof, I said simply. He looked at me like he wanted to believe me, but he'd stopped believing in happy endings a long time ago. Mom, the police won't listen. They've already decided it's me. I signed things without reading. I trusted her with the accounts. This is my fault. I set the box down and took his face in my hands, something I hadn't done since he was a boy. No, Lucas. The only mistake you made was loving someone who saw your trust as weakness. His voice cracked. And Jamie? What happens to him if I go to prison? For a moment I couldn't speak. The thought of my grandson growing up with Tara's lies wrapped around him like chains made my stomach twist. We're not going to let that happen, I said finally. Ruth and I found enough to raise questions. And I still know people in town the attorney who handled my house sale owes me a favor. Ruth, who had been rummaging through the box, looked up. We can get him to verify these documents. If he confirms the signatures are fake, that's leverage. Lucas looked between us, disbelief softening into something like hope. You'd do that? After everything, I didn't let him finish. You're my son. There's no after everything. There's just still. That night, Ruth and I stayed up going through every page, marking inconsistencies, logging dates, building a quiet defense in the flicker of a single lamp. It felt strange, two old women, hunched over papers, fighting a war of ink and memory, but it also felt right. By morning, we had a pile of evidence and a plan. Ruth would take the documents to her cousin Harold, who happened to work in the local records office, while I arranged a meeting with the attorney. But just as I was slipping the papers into a folder, headlights flared outside. I froze. Ruth peered through the curtain. Grace, someone's here. A car door slammed. Heavy footsteps crunched against the gravel. Then came a sharp, steady knock. Lucas stepped out from the guest house, his expression pale. It's the police. My heart dropped. The knock came again, louder this time. Mrs. Ellington? A voice called. This is Detective Morris with the County Investigation Bureau. We have a few questions about your son. I turned to Lucas, my mind racing. He looked like a trapped animal. Mom, I can't if they take me now. I'll never get to explain, Ruth whispered fiercely. We'll stall them. I took a deep breath, smoothed my sweater, and opened the door. The detective stood tall, his expression unreadable but not unkind. Mrs. Ellington, we have reason to believe your son may be evading custody. Is he here? I met his gaze and felt my pulse thunder in my ears. No, I said calmly. He isn't. He studied me for a long moment, eyes narrowing slightly. If you're lying, ma'am, that's obstruction. I forced a small, weary smile. Then I suppose you'll have to prove that too. He hesitated, then nodded once. We'll be in touch. When his car finally pulled away, Ruth exhaled so loudly it startled me. Grace, my heart nearly leapt out of my chest. I pressed a trembling hand to my lips. Mine too. From outside, Lucas appeared again, pale and shaken. You didn't have to do that, he said softly. Yes, I said. I did. He looked down, shame and gratitude warring in his expression. What if they come back? Then, I said, looking him square in the eye, we'll be ready. We're not hiding in the dark anymore, Lucas. This time, we're fighting back with truth. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw something flicker in his eyes, something I hadn't seen in years. Faith. The morning after the police came felt like the calm before a storm. The kind of stillness that hums with quiet tension. Birds still sang. The world still moved. But underneath, everything had changed. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Lucas. He sat at the small kitchen table in the guest house, staring at the papers Ruth and I had gathered. His eyes were sunken, but there was something alive in them now, a focus, a determination I hadn't seen in years. We can use these, he said, tapping the forgeries. If the bank records show the same signatures, it proves Tara was handling the accounts. That she forged them, I nodded. But we'll need someone to verify it officially. If it's just us, it won't hold. Ruth came in carrying a thermos of coffee and 2 sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. Harold's in, she said. He's working late at the records office tonight. I told him you might stop by. God bless that man, I said, taking a deep breath. Then that's where we start, Lucas hesitated. Mom, if they see me, I shook my head. They won't. You stay here. Ruth and I will handle this part. He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my voice must have reminded him I wasn't asking. As Ruth and I drove into town, the air was heavy with summer heat, pressing down like a weight. I tried to keep my hand steady on the steering wheel, but every red light felt like an eternity. When we finally reached the small beige building where Harold worked, Ruth gave me a reassuring nod. Let me talk first. He trusts me. Inside, the hum of old fluorescent lights filled the room. Harold, a wiry man in his 60s with a kind face and coffee-stained tie, looked up from his desk. "Well, if it isn't the Carter sisters in spirit," he said with a grin. "To what do I owe this evening's mischief?" Ruth chuckled. "You've known me long enough to recognize that word too well." She lowered her voice. "Harold, we need help. And discretion." That made him sit straighter. "You've got both, if it's within reason." I slid the folder across the desk. "These documents are part of a case. My son's name is on them, but it's not his handwriting. He's being accused of fraud. We believe the real culprit is his wife, Tara Ellington." Harold's eyes widened as he flipped through the papers. "Good Lord, Grace, this is serious." "I know," I said softly. "Can you verify if these documents or any similar ones went through your office?" He frowned, adjusting his glasses. "Let me check." The next 20 minutes felt endless. Ruth paced. I stared at the muted clock on the wall, its second hand moving slower than it should. Finally, Harold looked up, his expression grim. "Grace," he said quietly. "These documents match several transactions from 2 years ago. But here's the thing, there are 2 sets of records, one under your son's name and another under someone else's." I leaned forward. "Someone else's?" He nodded. "A shell named T. Lawson. The addresses don't exist, and the signatures are the same as these." "Tara Lawson," Ruth said suddenly, her eyes wide. That was her maiden name. My heart sank. So she created a fake business identity to funnel money through? Harold nodded grimly. "Looks that way." But she covered her tracks well. "Everything points back to Lucas on paper. If this goes public, he'll take the fall unless someone exposes the second identity first." I exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of the desk. "Then we find it. We prove she used that alias." Harold hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Grace, I can make copies of these and flag the inconsistencies for you. But officially, my hands are tied. You'll need legal representation." "I understand," I said. "Thank you, Harold." When we stepped outside, the night air hit like a wave of warmth and fear. Ruth looked over at me, face pale but resolute. "She's worse than we thought." "Yes," I said quietly. "And she's not finished yet." We didn't have to wait long to learn that. When I got home, the porch light was already on. The door was unlocked. A cold dread slid down my spine. "I locked that," I whispered. Ruth and I exchanged a look. I pushed the door open slowly. The living room lights were on, papers scattered across the floor. My heart stopped when I saw the box the one with the original documents emptied, its contents gone. She was here, Ruth breathed. I moved through the house, each step heavier than the last. Nothing else was touched. Not the jewelry, not the cash I kept in the kitchen drawer. Just the evidence. On the table, where the box had been, sat a single sheet of paper. It wasn't handwritten. It was printed. Typed in bold, sharp letters. "Stop digging, Grace. You don't know what you're dealing with. The next time you lie to the police, I won't be the one knocking." I sank into the chair, the note trembling in my hand. Ruth cursed under her breath. "That snake of a woman. She's getting desperate," I said. "That means we're close." Ruth turned to me sharply. "Grace, she broke into your house. This isn't just fraud anymore. This is dangerous." I met her gaze steadily. "It's always been dangerous, Ruth, but if we stop now, Lucas loses everything. Jamie grows up believing his father's a criminal. I won't let that happen." Ruth exhaled slowly, then nodded. "All right, then we keep going. But not alone. I've got a cousin in private security used to work for the city. He can help us track down Tara's alias, maybe even find where she's hiding." That night, I locked every window and double-checked every door. Lucas stayed hidden at the guest house, though the sight of police cars passing by twice made both our hearts race. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized something had shifted deep inside me. I was no longer just a mother defending her son. I was a woman reclaiming her voice, the one I'd swallowed for years in the name of peace. And this time, peace wouldn't come from silence. It would come from truth. Before dawn, my phone buzzed. A message. No name. No greeting. "You think you can outsmart me? I warned you," but beneath it, in smaller letters and attachment, a blurry photograph. It was Jamie, sitting in the back seat of a car. Eyes wide, scared. My breath caught, and in that instant I understood. Tara wasn't just running anymore. She was threatening, and she had my grandson. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The world around me dimmed, my heartbeat thundered in my ears, and the only thing I could see was Jamie's terrified little face on that phone screen. The photo was grainy but unmistakable, those wide blue eyes, that small freckled nose. My grandson, in a car. In danger. Ruth, I whispered, my voice trembling. She has him. Ruth, who'd been half dozing in the armchair, shot up. What do you mean she has him? I handed her the phone, my hands shaking so hard I could barely keep my grip. She squinted at the image, her mouth tightening into a hard line. That witch, she breathed. That absolute Grace, we've got to go to the police. I shook my head. If we go now, they'll arrest Lucas. He's still a suspect. They'll think he's behind the kidnapping. And Tara knows that. She's counting on it. Ruth ran a hand through her hair, muttering under her breath. Then what do we do? I stared at the photo again. Behind Jamie, I could make out a reflection in the car window, a faint, blurry sign. It looked like a street name. Havenwood. Havenwood, I said aloud. Ruth, doesn't your cousin's old security firm have access to city surveillance? If we can find any footage of a car like this on that street, she caught on instantly. We can trace where she went. It was the faintest thread of hope, but it was something. Ruth's cousin, Derek, answered her call on the second ring. Even half asleep, he sounded sharp. You're telling me you've got a missing kid, a runaway daughter-in-law, and a fraud case? Ruth, I thought you retired from excitement. Just check the damn cameras, Ruth snapped. He sighed but didn't argue. Send me the photo. While we waited, I sat there gripping my mug like it was the only thing tethering me to the earth. Every minute felt like an hour. Finally, Derek called back. I found something, he said. About an hour ago, a silver Lexus matching that window tint was seen leaving the city limits heading north on Highway 27. There's a small rental property near Havenwood Lake registered under a fake name T. Lawson. Tara's alias. My heart nearly stopped. Can you send me the address? He hesitated. Grace, if this woman's as dangerous as you say, you shouldn't go near her. I won't be alone, I said firmly. And I'm not waiting for permission to save my grandson. The address came through seconds later. I grabbed my coat, the folder of documents, and the car keys. Ruth was already right behind me. We drove through the dark countryside, the road twisting through thick trees and mist. The headlights cut thin beams through the fog, and the only sound was the rhythmic hum of the tires on asphalt. Ruth broke the silence. You sure about this, Grace? No, I said, but I've spent too many years doing nothing. When we reached the lake, the world was still. The water mirrored the pale glow of the moon, and at the edge of the dirt road stood a small cabin, one window lit, one car parked outside. The same silver Lexus. There, Ruth whispered, pointing. My heart hammered so hard I could barely breathe. Stay here, I said quietly. If anything goes wrong, call the police. Grace, please, I said. For Jamie. She nodded reluctantly, gripping her phone. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the cabin, my shoes crunching against the gravel. The air smelled of pine and rain. My fingers trembled as I knocked on the door. No answer. I tried the handle. It turned. Inside, the air was thick and stale, like the place hadn't been lived in for long. Boxes sat stacked near the walls, half-packed. A faint sound drifted from the back room, a voice, soft and strained. Jamie? I whispered. There was a shuffle. Then a tiny voice quivering. Grandma? Tears flooded my eyes as I followed the sound. He was there, sitting on the floor beside a pile of blankets, eyes wide but unharmed. I rushed forward, dropping to my knees and pulling him into my arms. Oh, sweetheart, I whispered. You're safe now. You're safe, he clung to me, trembling. Mommy said we were leaving forever. But I didn't want to go. I kissed his hair. You're not going anywhere now, baby. But before I could stand, a voice froze me where I knelt. Well, Tara said from behind me, her tone ice cold. Isn't this touching? I turned slowly. She stood in the doorway, one hand on her hip, the other holding a phone. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I should have known you'd come, she said. Always the savior, always the martyr. Tara, I said softly, standing between her and Jamie, you don't have to do this. It's over. We know about the fake contracts, the alias. We have proof! She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. Proof? You think anyone's going to believe you? A retired widow and a disgraced mother covering for her criminal son? Please, I took a cautious step forward. Lucas didn't know. You used him, her eyes flashed.
He used me, she hissed.
He wanted success but didn't have the stomach for it. So I made it happen. Everything we had, the house, the clients, the cars, it was me keeping it all afloat while he played the good man. You framed him to protect yourself. She tilted her head. To survive, Grace, there's a difference. I glanced toward the window. Headlights were approaching Ruth. She must have called Derek. Tara noticed too. Her grip on the phone tightened. You called someone, she said sharply. Tara, listen to me, I said, my voice low, steady. You're out of options. Just walk away before this gets worse. For a moment, something flickered across her face, fear, maybe, or realization. Then she shook her head. No, I'm not going to prison because your son was too weak to play along. She took a step closer, but before she could say another word, red and blue lights flooded through the window. Sirens blared, Tara froze. Outside, a voice shouted, Police! Step outside, hands up! Her mask cracked. You called them, she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't move. No, Tara, you did this. Her hand dropped to her side. The phone slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a dull thud. Moments later, the door burst open. Officers swept in, shouting commands. Tara didn't resist. She just stood there, hollow-eyed, as they led her away. When they passed me, she met my gaze one last time. You think you've won, she said bitterly. But you'll lose him anyway. He'll never forgive you for this. I didn't answer. I just gathered Jamie into my arms and whispered, I already lost him once. I'm not losing you too. Outside, Ruth was waiting. She ran forward, tears streaming, pulling both of us into a trembling hug. Oh, thank God! Grace, you did it! I held Jamie close, feeling his small heartbeat against mine. No, I said softly. We did. The police car drove away, lights fading into the distance. The dawn broke over the lake, soft and gold, like a promise I'd nearly stopped believing in. For the first time in years, I felt something pure, something I thought I'd never feel again. Hope. The morning after Tara's arrest, everything felt strangely quiet. The chaos had passed, yet the silence it left behind carried a kind of heaviness I couldn't name. Jamie was asleep on the couch, wrapped in one of Ruth's knitted blankets, his tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. For the first time in days, I let myself exhale. Ruth stood by the window, phone in hand. They've confirmed it, she said softly. Tara's being held without bail. Fraud, forgery, embezzlement, the whole thing. Apparently, she's been using Lucas's name for years. They traced everything back to her alias. I closed my eyes. The relief came slow, almost reluctant, as if my heart didn't trust it yet. And Lucas? They're clearing his record, Ruth said, her voice warm with something close to pride. The detectives believe he didn't know. Harold's copies sealed it. You saved him, Grace. I looked at her then, my eyes brimming. No, we did. I couldn't have done this alone. She smiled and placed a hand on my shoulder. You're stronger than you think, my dear. Always have been. Before I could reply, the door creaked open. Lucas stood there. He looked like a man who'd been through a war unkempt, tired, eyes rimmed red, but for the first time in years, I saw the boy I'd raised in that face. The one who used to leave love notes on the fridge written in crayon. Mom, he said quietly. My breath caught. Lucas, he stepped closer, hesitating only a second before pulling me into his arms. I'm so sorry, he whispered. For everything. For what I said. For shutting you out. For making you go through all of this. I held him tightly, feeling tears spill freely down my cheeks. You came back, I said softly. That's all that matters now. When he pulled away, his eyes fell on Jamie sleeping on the couch. His expression crumpled. God, I thought I lost him. You didn't, I said. He's safe now. And he needs his father more than ever. He nodded slowly, swallowing hard. I don't know how to fix this, Mom. How to give him a normal life after everything. I smiled faintly. You start by being here. That's all a child really needs to know. His father didn't run away. He took a deep breath, shoulders trembling, and sat beside his son. His hand brushed through Jamie's hair. I'm sorry, buddy, he whispered. Daddy's home now. It was one of those moments that felt suspended in time, fragile, sacred, healing. When Jamie stirred awake, his sleepy eyes lit up the moment he saw his father. "Daddy?" Lucas smiled through tears. "Yeah, buddy. It's me." Jamie sat up and threw his arms around his neck. "I knew you'd come." Ruth turned away discreetly, muttering, "If I watch this any longer, I'll need tissues and tea." Over the next few days, the investigation unfolded quickly. Tara's financial records told a story of greed and manipulation, fake clients, falsified appraisals, and a paper trail that painted her as the mastermind. Lucas's name was cleared in every report, his accounts unfrozen, his reputation slowly rebuilt. But for Lucas, the relief was bittersweet. "I should have seen it sooner," he said one afternoon as we sat on the porch. "She was always so convincing. I thought she was helping me succeed." "You saw what you wanted to see," I said gently. "Love makes us blind sometimes. But blindness isn't weakness, Lucas. It's proof that you trusted too deeply. And that's not something to be ashamed of." He nodded, eyes thoughtful. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," I replied. "Just promise me one thing: don't disappear again." He smiled faintly. "Never." Life didn't return to normal overnight. Healing rarely does. But each day brought a small piece of peace back into the world. Lucas began helping with my move to the cottage by the lake. He fixed leaky pipes, repainted old furniture, and even convinced Jamie that fishing was an important family tradition. Watching them together felt like watching sunlight pour back into a room that had been dark for too long. Ruth visited often, usually with muffins or gossip, though she insisted the two were equally nutritious. "The town's buzzing about you, Grace," she said one morning. "The woman who helped crack a fraud ring and rescued her grandson. They'll probably name a street after you," I laughed. "If they do, I hope it's one with no traffic lights. I've had enough red stops for one lifetime." But even as we joked, there were moments that reminded me how fragile peace could be. Lucas received a court summons to testify against Tara. He dreaded it, not because he wanted to protect her, but because facing her meant reopening wounds he'd barely begun to close. The day of the hearing, he sat beside me on the courthouse bench, hands clasped, gaze distant. "Do you think she'll hate me?" I turned to him. "Maybe for a while. But hate is just guilt in disguise. She'll have time to see what she's done." When Tara was brought in, she looked different, smaller somehow, her confidence stripped away. She didn't look at us until Lucas stood to give his statement. His voice trembled at first, but soon grew steady. He spoke the truth not cruelly, not angrily, but with the clarity of someone who had finally found peace with his past. "I loved her," he said to the court. "And I forgive her. But forgiveness doesn't erase responsibility." When it was over, he turned to me. I could see the tears in his eyes, but also something stronger: freedom. Outside, the sky had softened into that pale gold hue that always comes after a storm. Ruth met us at the courthouse steps, arms wide, eyes sparkling. "So are we finally done chasing drama?" Lucas chuckled softly. "I hope so." I smiled, slipping my arm through his. "Life will bring new storms, Ruth, but this time we know how to stand through them." That night, back at the cottage, I tucked Jamie into bed. He looked up at me sleepily. "Grandma," he murmured, "are we all going to live here forever?" I smiled, brushing his hair back. "Maybe not forever, sweetheart, but for now, long enough to make new memories." He nodded, eyes drifting closed. "I like that." I watched him for a moment, the soft rhythm of his breathing filling the quiet room. When I stepped outside, the lake shimmered under the moonlight. Lucas stood there, staring out at the water. "Do you ever think Dad would be proud of us?" he asked softly. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in years, I didn't see the boy who'd left. "I saw the man who came home." "Yes," I said. "He'd be proud of the man you became, and of the father you're still learning to be." Lucas smiled faintly, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. The night wrapped around us like a quiet promise, a reminder that broken things can be mended, and love, once lost, can find its way home again. The wind rippled through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a swing creaked softly, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. It's been 6 months since the trial ended. 6 months since Tara was sentenced, since the papers finally stopped printing our names, and since the weight of the past began to lift from our shoulders. the cottage by the lake has become home small, quiet, and full of warmth. Every creak in the floorboards, every beam of morning light feels like a heartbeat reminding me we made it through. Life here moves slowly, beautifully so. Lucas has found a job at a local construction company, nothing like the suits and high-rises of his old life, but honest work. Work that leaves him tired in the best way, the kind that builds something you can touch and be proud of. Sometimes, when he comes home covered in sawdust and sweat, I see a piece in him I never thought he'd find again. Jamie goes to a small school in town. His laughter fills the cottage every afternoon as he bursts through the door, backpack slung over one arm, full of stories about frogs by the lake and drawings of dragons that live in trees, and dear Ruth still visits every evening, always claiming she's just dropping by, but somehow always staying long enough for tea, gossip, and 2 slices of pie. I've started keeping a journal again. At first, it was just small notes, things I didn't want to forget. But now, it's become something more, a way to remember the journey. The moments of fear, the quiet prayers, the unexpected miracles. Sometimes when I write, I find myself smiling, because even the pain now feels like part of the story that led us here. One afternoon, as golden light streamed through the kitchen window, Lucas sat at the table with me. Jamie was outside with Ruth, skipping stones across the water. The house smelled of fresh bread cooling on the counter. Lucas cleared his throat softly. "Mom, I've been thinking about buying back the old house someday. Not now, but maybe when things settle more. I want Jamie to see where he came from, where we came from." I smiled, tracing the rim of my teacup. "That house holds a lot of memories, Lucas. Some sweet, some not. But if that's what your heart wants, you'll know when it's time." He looked at me for a long moment, then said something I didn't expect. "You were right, you know. Love isn't about holding on, it's about letting go when it's time. I used to think you let go of me, but now I understand you just stopped waiting for me to come back." I felt a lump form in my throat. I never stopped loving you, Lucas. I just had to start loving myself again, too. His eyes softened, and he reached across the table, covering my hand with his. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I squeezed his hand gently. "It's what mothers do." Outside, Jamie's laughter carried through the open window. "Grandma! Daddy, come see!" I skipped 5 in a row. Lucas grinned. "Let's go see the champion," he said, standing. We walked outside together, the late afternoon sun painting everything in gold. The lake shimmered. The air smelled of pine and summer. Ruth clapped dramatically as Jamie proudly pointed to the ripples across the water. "Well," Ruth said, "looks like we've got a professional stone skipper on our hands." Jamie laughed, tossing another one. "That one's for Grandma." It landed perfectly 5 skips before sinking. I laughed, tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. "You're getting too good for me, sweetheart." He ran up, wrapping his arms around my waist. "That's okay," he said, looking up at me with that same light I once saw in his father's eyes. "I'll teach you." I glanced at Lucas, and for a moment, our eyes met across the soft glow of the sunset. There was understanding there. Gratitude. Love. The kind that doesn't need words. Later that night, after Jamie had gone to bed and the house was quiet, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. The moon reflected off the lake, the same way it had that night so many months ago when everything seemed lost. But this time, it wasn't loss I saw in the reflection. It was peace. The past would always be part of me. The silence, the tears, the ache of being shut out. But so would this. The laughter echoing through these walls, the second chances, the reminder that love can be bruised and still remain whole. As I watched the moonlight ripple across the water, I whispered softly into the night. We found our way back. A gentle breeze drifted through the open window, cool and tender against my cheek as if answering, and maybe, just maybe, it was autumn came early that year. The trees around the lake turned gold and amber, their reflections rippling gently across the still water. Each morning I'd sit by the window with my tea, watching the leaves drift down like memories letting go of the branches that once held them. It's funny how peace doesn't arrive all at once. It comes quietly, in small, deliberate moments. In laughter that doesn't feel forced anymore. In silence that isn't lonely. In the steady rhythm of life that no longer hurts to wake up to. Lucas had started volunteering at the local youth center, teaching teenagers about carpentry. He said it made him feel like he was building something real again. Sometimes I'd stop by and watch him from the doorway, surrounded by sawdust and laughter. His sleeves rolled up, his voice calm and patient. The other volunteers adored him. They called him Mr. Ellington with the steady hands. One afternoon, I found him sitting on the porch steps after work, the air filled with the sweet scent of burning leaves. He was quiet, thoughtful, his gaze on the lake. "What are you thinking about?" I asked, sitting beside him. He smiled faintly. "How lucky I am. How close I came to losing everything that mattered." I reached over and placed a hand on his arm. "Sometimes life has to break us open so light can get in." He nodded slowly. "You always talk like you've lived 3 lives, Mom." I laughed softly. "Maybe I have." He looked down at his hands. "Do you ever think about her? About Tara?" The question hung in the air between us, gentle but sharp. I took a slow breath. "Sometimes," I admitted. Not out of anger. More out of sadness. For what she became. For what she could have been. He nodded. "Jamie doesn't remember much about her. Sometimes I wonder if that's a blessing." "It might be," I said softly. "But one day he'll ask. And when he does, you tell him the truth but kindly. Tell him his mother made mistakes, but she loved him in the only way she knew how. Let him remember her as human, not a villain." Lucas's eyes filled with quiet tears. "You still find compassion, even after everything." "Compassion doesn't excuse the past," I said. "But it keeps the heart from turning bitter. And I want him to grow up in a home that teaches forgiveness, not fear." That evening, Jamie ran up to us holding a crumpled drawing. "Look, Daddy. Look, Grandma," he said proudly, waving the paper in the air. It was a picture of the 3 of us standing in front of the lake, me, Lucas, and Jamie, each of us holding hands, smiling. Above us, he'd written in large, uneven letters, "Our family, forever." Lucas took the drawing with trembling hands. I saw his jaw tighten, his eyes glistening as he said, "It's perfect, buddy." Jamie grinned. "I made it for Grandma's wall," and he ran inside, pinning it next to the kitchen window where the morning light always falls. When he was gone, Lucas exhaled shakily. "I'll never stop trying to deserve this," he whispered. "You already do," I said. The weeks passed gently. Life had become a rhythm of simple joys, mornings with tea and birdsong, afternoons filled with laughter and sawdust, evenings where Ruth would bring over a deck of cards and too much dessert. Sometimes we'd talk about the past, but most days we didn't need to. It wasn't denial, it was peace. The kind that comes from surviving what you thought you couldn't and realizing you still have love left to give. One crisp October evening, Ruth and I sat outside as the sun dipped low behind the trees. The lake glowed copper, and the air carried that bittersweet chill that hints of winter's approach. "You know," Ruth said, sipping her cocoa, "you should write this all down someday. Everything that happened. It's a story people need to hear," I smiled. "Maybe I already am," she chuckled. "Of course you are. You've got that secret little notebook, don't you?" I didn't deny it. The journal had become my companion, my quiet confession. Each entry felt like a seed planted in soil I'd once thought barren. Later, after Ruth left, I walked down to the water. The moon hung low, casting a silver path across the rippling surface. I could hear Lucas and Jamie laughing inside the cottage, their voices warm, alive. I closed my eyes and whispered a prayer not of asking, but of gratitude. For second chances. For the kind of love that endures even after the storms. For forgiveness that doesn't erase the past, but redeems it. The wind stirred gently, brushing against my cheek like an old friend. I looked up at the sky, scattered with stars, and felt something deep and steady in my chest. Maybe peace isn't about forgetting the pain. Maybe it's about learning to live alongside it and realizing that it no longer has power over you. As I turned back toward the cottage, the soft glow of the porch light guided me home. Jamie's drawing fluttered in the window. The words, "Our family, forever," catching the moonlight, and for the first time in my life, I believed it. Winter came softly that year, wrapping the lake in mist and silver mornings. Frost painted the windows like lace, and every breath outside turned into a fleeting ghost in the air. The world felt quieter, slower, like life itself was taking a deep breath before turning the page. I've always believed the cold has a way of revealing truth. It strips away the unnecessary, leaving only what matters most. And that winter, I realized something simple yet profound. What mattered had finally come home. Lucas and Jamie had settled into a rhythm together, breakfasts full of laughter, evenings spent reading by the fire. There was no trace left of the tension that once filled every silence between us. Instead, there was warmth. Not perfect, not flawless, but real. The kind that takes years to build and only moments to recognize. One morning, I woke early to the sound of soft footsteps. When I peeked into the kitchen, I saw Lucas and Jamie making pancakes. Flour dusted the counter, and Jamie stood on a stool, giggling as he tried to flip one on his own. It landed half off the pan. Lucas laughed, and Jamie joined him. I leaned against the doorway, my heart full. They didn't notice me at first, and I didn't want them to. I wanted to memorize it, the light, the sound, the peace that once felt like a dream I'd never wake into. Later, as we ate, Jamie looked up at me and said, "Grandma, are you happy now?" The question startled me. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because it was the first time in years I realized I did. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, smiling softly. "I think I finally am." He grinned, satisfied, and went back to drowning his pancakes in syrup. That night, after they'd gone to bed, I sat by the fire with my journal. I turned to a blank page, my pen hovering before I began to write, not about pain or loss this time, but about what came after. There's a quiet that comes after forgiveness. It doesn't shout, it doesn't announce itself. It just sits beside you, steady and kind, and reminds you that you've survived, that you've learned. That love, true love, can bend without breaking. I used to think letting go meant giving up, but now I know it means trusting life to carry you somewhere softer. Somewhere safe, maybe that's what grace really is. Not something you earn, but something you grow into when you've stopped running from the truth. I closed the book and watched the fire flicker lower. The clock ticked softly. Somewhere upstairs, Jamie mumbled in his sleep, and Lucas's steady footsteps moved across the floorboards. The sound of a home. A sound I thought I'd never hear again. A few weeks later, on the first clear day after a heavy snow, we took a walk along the frozen lake. Jamie skipped ahead, his laughter echoing across the ice. Lucas walked beside me, hands in his coat pockets, his face calm in the pale winter light. "Do you ever think about what's next?" he asked quietly. I smiled. "Every day, but not with worry anymore. Just curiosity," he nodded. "I've been offered a position in the city. It's a good one. Better pay, more stability. But I don't know if I want to leave this." I looked out across the frozen water. The trees stood tall and bare, unafraid of the cold, trusting spring would return. "Maybe for once, you don't need to chase anything, Lucas. Maybe it's enough to stay." He looked at me, then at Jamie chasing a snowflake, and nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think you're right." We stood there in silence, our breath clouding in the air, the world shimmering around us. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't scare me. It felt like an open hand, not a closed door. That night, as I tucked Jamie into bed, he whispered sleepily, "Grandma, will it always be like this?" I brushed his hair back, smiling. "Maybe not always, sweetheart. But when it's not, we'll remember that it once was. And we'll find our way back." After he fell asleep, I walked out to the porch. The moon was full, the lake glistening under its light. I thought of all that had happened, the years of distance, the heartbreak, the fear, the forgiveness. It all led here, to this quiet peace. Ruth had once told me that time doesn't heal everything, it just gives you a place to put the pain. She was right, but what she didn't say was that love, if you let it, fills those empty spaces until they don't hurt anymore. As I stood there, snow falling softly around me, I whispered into the still night, "Thank you," not to anyone in particular, just to life itself for the second chances, the lessons, and the love that refused to leave even when everything else did. The world felt still, sacred, infinite, and for the first time, I wasn't waiting for anything. I was exactly where I was meant to be. Inside, the clock chimed softly. Another day, another breath, another beginning, and as I closed the door behind me, I smiled knowing that sometimes the greatest story isn't the one about what we lost, but the one about how we found our way home. Spring arrived gently, almost shyly, as if the earth too was waking from something long and hard. The lake thawed, the trees stretched out new buds, and the air smelled of damp soil and beginning again. It had been nearly a year since the storm that changed everything. The year that took everything apart, only to put it back together in a way that finally made sense. Some mornings I still woke early, before the sun crested the hills. I'd make my tea and sit by the same window where I'd once waited for a call that never came. But now I didn't wait. I just watched the sunrise painting the lake in shades of gold and rose, the sound of birds returning home. Jamie would tumble down the stairs soon after, hair messy, smile wide. "Morning, Grandma," he'd say as if it were a new gift every day. And behind him, Lucas, holding 2 mugs of coffee, one already waiting for me. We didn't need grand words anymore. The silence between us wasn't heavy now, it was full, alive. The kind of silence you share with people you've learned to love deeply, honestly without conditions. Sometimes, when Ruth visited, she'd laugh and say, "I swear, Grace Ellington, you've turned this place into heaven on earth." I'd smile and answer, "Not heaven, Ruth, just home. It wasn't perfect." Some days, old memories still ached the years of distance. The sound of that phone call when Lucas told me I'd never see Jamie again. But the pain had changed shape. It no longer pierced. It whispered, and I'd learned to listen without breaking. There was a day in late May when Lucas found me sitting by the garden, pruning roses. He knelt beside me, helping quietly. After a while, he said, "Do you ever regret any of it?" I looked at him, the son who had once walked away, who now came home every evening with a peace I'd prayed years for. "No," I said simply. "Regret only belongs to people who stop halfway. We didn't stop," he smiled faintly. "I wish Dad could see this." I placed a hand over his. "He does. Every time you hold your son, he's there. Every time you choose kindness instead of pride, he's there." Lucas nodded, eyes glistening, then whispered, "Thank you for never closing the door." I smiled. "You're the one who walked back through it." That evening, as the sun melted into the lake, we all sat on the porch, Ruth, with her lemonade, Jamie chasing fireflies, and Lucas strumming softly on an old guitar he'd found at a yard sale. The golden light wrapped around us like a memory made real. The laughter, the music, the peace, it felt like the ending of a story and the beginning of another all at once. When night fell, I looked up at the stars, those same silent witnesses to every prayer, every tear, every small miracle that had led us here, and I whispered softly, "We made it." And maybe that's all any story is in the end. A series of losses and lessons that teach us how to love better the next time. The past no longer haunted me. It simply lived alongside me, gentle and quiet. Forgiveness had done its work. As I watched Jamie chase his last firefly before bedtime, I thought of something my mother once told me. Life isn't about keeping what's perfect, it's about cherishing what's real. I smiled to myself, because in that small cottage by the lake, surrounded by love that had been tested and returned stronger, I had everything real, and for the first time in my long life, that was enough.